first of all deal with the pessimism. The pessimists are on that side of the house. They're pessimistic because they don't seem to realise that Britain in Europe, very much involved in Europe, helping to make decisions in Europe, is a strong power within the global world which we now live. When I say global world, it's a globalising world. If you look around the world, you will see examples of countries always working together, more or less closely, whether it's Asia, or whether it's Latin America, or South America, etc. Even the US has to work with others. There is no way in which any country, it's not a question of we're the fifth largest, no country is an island, you know, just, sorry. We are, but I was thinking of John Donne. So, what I mean by that is, we can't operate on our own. We want to work, and we need to work with others. People talk about, again, the UK being the fifth largest. If you look at trade, then there's a problem with trade. Because one of the problems is that our trade deficit is something like 7% of our GDP. Now, much of that is in manufacturing. But there are some bright spots. In fact, it would be even worse if we didn't have trade in services. We actually have a surplus with the rest of the EU in services. Very important, 30 billion, actually. And also 2/3 of our total services output goes to the rest of the EU. This is the dynamic for the UK. Ironically, Patrick Minford, who is on the Leave side, actually mentioned this. The only problem with Minford is he seems to suggest we could forget about manufacturing, it'll gradually disappear. I'm not sure some of my friends working at Nissan and others will actually be too keen on the idea that manufacturing should simply disappear. No, we need to improve our competitivity in manufacturing. I don't want to give up on manufacturing simply because we have a deficit. What I do want to stress is the importance of services and the strength which we have. And this, don't forget, is in a single market which is not yet completed as far as service is concerned. If you want to be optimistic about trade from the UK within the EU and more widely, then it's services that you want to look at, and it's the completion of the single market in relation to services that you actually want to see. And the British within Europe, the UK, within the various discussions which take place at Council of Ministers level with the European Parliament, etc. And don't forget the European Parliament, I mean, Anne-Marie sort of rather poo-pooed the European Parliament. It has power of co-decision over many issues. The only area which it really doesn't have much of an impact yet is on the economy. But in other areas, it has power of co-decision with the Council of Ministers, on which the UK sits, and has a powerful voice. And there is weighted voting on that body. So the idea that somehow the European Parliament doesn't have any influence, I can understand why a Westminster MP is so concerned to put down the European Parliament, because the European Parliament MEPs have far more power than any MP in Westminster that is driven by the whips, as Anne-Marie knows. You're all right, try voting against your own government. No, the important thing about the European Parliament is that it is part of the democratic process within the EU. Now, people will say, yeah, it's not as democratic as the UK. Remind you of a statement made a long time ago by a Tory ex-Lord Chancellor, Lord Hailsham. He described the British governance system as an elective dictatorship. Actually, it's even more of a dictatorship now under this government, but I don't want to make part of it. Well, it's just how. But the important thing is that comparing the UK in terms of the way legislation, and sometimes not legislation, but executive acts go through without almost without challenge, and you compare that with the EU, and I mean I've worked within the EU, it can take 3 or 4 years to get things agreed. That's part of the problem. It's not because it's actually anti-democratic, rather the opposite, it's a bit too democratic. Sometimes Yes.
What's democratic about the fact that twice in the last 5 years the EU has effectively sacked the elected governments of 2 member states and replaced it with technocrats that are more acceptable to Brussels?
Well, the two, I'm not sure about the one of them, but one of them is clearly Greece, is what you're talking about. If you look carefully at what happened in the Greek situation, most people in this country don't seem to understand, including politicians, that in fact the Eurozone is run by the Eurogroup. Now the Eurogroup, which is in the Protocol of the Lisbon Treaty, is simply the finance ministers of the 19 countries that are inside the Eurozone. Not the European Commission, not the ECB, and certainly not the IMF. This so-called Troika did not actually take the decision. They were taken by the German finance minister, the Finnish finance minister, supported by the Irish finance minister. These were the people who actually put down the Greece. If you look at the record, you will find that Christine Lagarde, for instance, at one point went back to Washington because she couldn't convince the German finance minister that actually debt forgiveness was absolutely necessary. You needed to write off a fair chunk of Greek debt. That is still the case, and it will still have to be written.
On information,
yeah?
Where in this process do the Greek people get a say?
The British people, the Greek people actually did vote, and they empowered their government to negotiate on their behalf. The problem was that basically the politicians in the other European countries, most of them, not Italy actually, were the ones that actually put them down. Not the EU per se. That's the point. Not the Troika, not the ECB, not the IMF, not the European Commission. If you had a proper structure for the Eurozone, and don't forget I was economic advisor of the Parliament in 98 when it was being set up, if you had a proper structure for the Eurozone, and it still needs that, you would not have basically 19 finance ministers doing it. You would do what the rest of the EU does, papers produced by the Commission and then discussed, not in just one meeting, where you then finish up with a majority of finance ministers, but where you have to go through the whole panoply of decision-making, consulting the various institutions of the EU, including the European Parliament, including the Council of Ministers. That would not, had we had that structure, and that structure should be changed. I'm not going to argue that the EU doesn't require reform. It does. And the Eurozone in particular needs reform in order to move to a more sensible way of making decisions, which do not put countries like Greece into this position. So that's the point about Greece, I think. Anne-Marie mentioned laws, that somehow this idea that you know, the EU rules all our laws. We can't do anything can't make any laws without reference to the EU. That's simply not true. In the area where the EU has competences, yes, we surrender sovereignty. I say surrender sovereignty, I mean we agreed by treaty and by various successive decisions, we surrender that sovereignty because it's in our interest to do so. Because most of the areas where the Commission has competence are areas of benefit to us in terms of trade, in terms of the environment, in terms of workers' rights, citizens' rights, women's rights. These are the areas where the EU has competence in terms of legal competence. In other areas, we make our own laws. And the VAT, I'm sorry, I didn't realise that the EU could stop the government from increasing VAT or decreasing VAT if it wants. In fact, there's no the main rate can be varied. The main rate can be varied. There's no question about that. No, you're not inhibited here. It's been done. I mean, the Labour government, the Labour government took it down by 2.5%, and the Tory government came, or the coalition government came in and increased it again. No, you have perfect right to do that. instead of on the tampons issue, as a man, I'm slightly hesitant about this, but the fact is it's a 5% tax, and that was agreed by the British government in the 1990s, actually, that particular level. It should be possible to change it. It should be. No, it is.
We are unable to zero rate, which is what the British people would like us to do.
I think it is, but we're talking about 5% on the
For the
price.
British
That's
within
what we're
50%
talking
of the
about.
population,
I
they'd
agree
like
with you.
that done.
I agree with you. I agree
But
with
we
you.
cannot do it.
I agree with you, but no, that's not true. Actually, you know, I can in discussion, I'll tell you how to do
I'll
it.
show you the legal paperwork.
I'll tell you how to do it. It's perfectly possible. There might be challenges, but it's perfectly possible. There are all sorts of things you can do within the EU if you know how to do it. Right, I'm going to wind up with a message really of hope and the future. Because really this is about the future. This is about your votes. This is about your future. Not somebody who's as old as me. If I had my way, nobody over 65 would have a vote. Because the future of Europe and the future of the UK in Europe is in your hands. You have to vote. You are Europeans. You feel Europeans. You know you're European, as well as being British. I mean, I'm an adopted Geordie. I support Newcastle United any Sunday, no, and Durham cricket team. But I'm also English. I'm also British, and I'm also European, and I'm a citizen of the world. And it's your future as citizens of the world that you need to actually look at the decision on June the 23rd to actually move forward within Europe, not outside it. I move to oppose the motion.